Good evening, sports fans. Welcome to another episode of Sports for All. And good morning to Dan, where he is. And welcome to the program. And thank you for saying yes, Dan. Thank you for coming in.
Gentlemen, Vince, Brian, thanks for having me. Look forward to it. Basketball is a global game, so always looking to help.
And my co-host Brian, the Godfather Yalung.
Yes, good evening to everybody. It's going to be a interesting conversation with Dan. I've been reading a lot.
All right, let's get to it. Okay, Dan. You're the associate director of IMG Academy, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The academy started as the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy, and then later it evolved into what is now known as the IMG Academy. And how long have you been involved with IMG?
I have been involved with the academy. It was actually called IMG Academies,
Okay.
plural. Whenever I started as an unpaid intern in 2003 in obviously the basketball department, working under a gentleman named Joe Abunasar, who is actually the founder and owner of Impact Basketball, another big training business. And I've been here on and off since 2003. Went 2003 to 2007. I'm sorry, 2006. Was gone from 2006 to 2008, and then returned in 2008, and have been here for the last 13 years in a variety of capacities.
Okay. I first saw you on Netflix on Satnam on the documentary on Satnam Singh, One in a Billion, and uh, can you tell us how was the whole experience with the documentary and with Satnam?
Hello. I'm sorry. It was the connection was not good.
Okay. Well, I'll repeat
Okay.
what I said. I first saw you on the Netflix documentary One in a Billion, which featured the development of Satnam Singh. So my question
Correct.
was, how was that whole experience with the documentary and with the whole development of Satnam Singh from the infancy of his arriving at IMG to now being a major contributor of the Indian national team?
It was, I mean, awesome. I mean, I was able to travel on the original adventure to New Delhi when we worked with the fund between Teddy Forsman and Mukesh Ambani, IMG Reliance, that sponsored, I believe it was 28 athletes across 4 sports. So I got to go over and select the basketball players along with our director at that time, Andy Borman, and then be intimately involved with the development. We ended up graduating, or 7 of the players finishing up their high school after 3 or 4 years here. The other sports did not have as much success. I believe there's still one of the tennis players, Nandini Das, is just finishing up at Florida State. And obviously, Satnam is still in a variety of international competitions with his pro career. So, when you see an idea that starts as an idea and you want to give people opportunities, and then it ends up, not only being a great experience and developing, great relationships, but also, a certain amount of the players and participants, using it as a stepping stone to help themselves, but also, as I keep track with some of the other players that were involved, they are now coaches and they are now participating on the international levels, whether it's FIBA 3-on-3 or pro leagues, and they're taking everything they were able to experience and helping move the game forward, obviously in a country that is continuing to develop basketball at a rapid pace. As far as the documentary goes, I mean, I think at the time it was a very interesting and intriguing story and idea. And it was a lot of work for everybody to kind of balance all of that. But I think that it provides hope, and it provides there's 20 other countries that have never had a college player or a professional player in the NBA to ever make it. And in these developing countries and developing basketball leagues, you just have to give people hope and kind of guidance that it is possible, that through networking, relationships, and hard work, you can put yourself on major platforms. And in Satnam's case, he had the opportunities, and now sometimes big men don't peak until they're in their 30s. So hopefully the future is still bright for him.
Who are the other professional athletes you have helped develop, not just in basketball but in other sports?
The Academy is obviously world famous. I mean, between the Nick Bollettieri tennis and the second phase of the growth of the Academy was Nick Bollettieri combining with a golf instructor named David Ledbetter. And then they became kind of a dual academy that eventually became purchased by IMG. But very historic tennis players as far as Andre Agassi and the Williams sisters, and now multiple of the top tennis players are still represented and train at IMG Academy, such as Kei Nishikori and Denis Shapovalov, who just did very well in the last tournaments. But as far as basketball goes, I mean, if you look at now how the coaching, when I first started here, we had guys like Chauncey Billups and Tyronn Lue, who are now coaching at the highest levels of the NBA, used to train at IMG Academy. And most recently we had, Ja Morant had spent, multiple weeks here the last couple summers. I mean, the lists on the wall are, have 20 or 30 current NBA players in there. But we had a stretch where we were developing 7 or 8 first round and second round picks every year from 2011 to about 2016. And now we're just looking to kind of really spend all of our energy on our high school athletes and on the players that are participating in our school. That will change soon. We're building a new 5-court facility that will give us some more space. We've been very space constrained with only 4 basketball courts. And I would imagine that a big portion of what we're going to do in the future is going to be heavy into the NBA player development again.
Ryan?
Okay, I'm just curious, Dan. You've been doing this for so many years right now, and we got hit by this pandemic. Did this in any way hamper your operations or your progress the past year?
Well, we were lucky. The pandemic actually struck right on our spring break last March. So we had about 10 days to figure out what we were going to do, which was much more time. We had about 30 basketball athletes out of 140 that stayed on campus with us. And we delivered both online school and online basketball training, weightlifting, nutrition, leadership, all of the entities that we deliver. We delivered it in a school format all the way through the middle of June. And then we had very restrictive basketball camps throughout the summer as well. So we never really had a complete shutdown. Obviously, as a business, we had to make some cutbacks, and some people got furloughed for a while, and different things had to go on from the business standpoint. But as soon as September hit, we were back in school. Kids were in school, obviously, following all the restrictions. And what we did with the teams was we placed all of the players into small groups so that we could do all of the contact tracing. And we limited a lot of live play for the first 3 weeks of school. to keep the separation and keep everything there. And we did really well with everything. We played about 440 of our 680 games. A lot of our high school games got canceled. We did have some kids that, had to quarantine at different times. That was unfortunate. And, you have to watch out for their mental health and make sure you stay on them while they're kind of locked up in the dorm. But overall, once we kind of got into February, we were operating in the pod system, but we were delivering at a high level. And we were able to, help a lot of our seniors and older players move on to college. Whereas a lot of states here, the Illinois and New York and California, if they played, it wasn't until April and May. We were able to have as normal of a year as possible. Now, the dorms were very restrictive and nobody could come on and off campus, and it was a very closed environment. So that was very different. But as far as the gym and being able to coach, it was very, during what's a tough time, was very therapeutic a lot of times for everybody.
So as a coach, you mentioned earlier, there was a time that you had to rely on online, well, virtual training, right? Okay.
Correct.
So a common thing that I hear from coaches and trainers is that it's very difficult to adapt to this kind of medium because of accuracy. I mean, it's very hard to monitor. Did you have that problem as well?
We ran. Our older players that were moving on to college did not participate as much. And again, in the basketball training world, if let's say you did live in Chicago or St. Louis, a lot of people had access to one-on-one training in closed gyms, so they may not have followed us. But I think where we had success was the constant communication and the constant differentiation. For instance, we took the time, we watch film and all of our teams watch scouting reports and we send out, clips on what to do better. But we were able to really dig into and create deep reels, we called them, for each player at their position. And then also create deep reels of college and NBA players and college and NBA teams and WNBA teams. And we were able to mesh that and give them much deeper education from a standpoint of learning through video. I do agree that the actual skill training and trying to get people better was challenging, and it was definitely frustrating when you're used to having the kids right in front of you and you can yell at them when they're not participating, to now they're not in front of you and you're trying to text them and DM them on Instagram and get them to prove that they're training. That was not optimal. But again, it was, if they watched 70% of what we sent them, then they were doing more than 95% of the people that were out there.
So it's really added effort. Well, those are the factors. Anyway, Vince, back to you.
Dan, who is you've handled a lot of kids before, and a lot of them have reached the NBA. Has there been a kid who lacks talent or not a lot of talent, but who's very, very hardworking? Have you handled anyone like that?
I'm sorry, it just cut out a little bit there.
My question was, you've handled a lot of kids, trained a lot of kids, and a handful of them or several of them have reached the NBA. So have you handled any kid, any young man who not really big on talent, but who's very, very hardworking and who has a big heart and never gives up, but unfortunately not big on talent?
That has made it to the NBA?
Well, well, not just perhaps not just the NBA, but Europe, Asia, Asian leagues, European leagues.
As far as our as far as our kids that actually graduated from our high school, I mean, I think the kid that plays for the Atlanta Hawks right now, Bruno Fernando, he, he was only here for 1 year, and then he went to the University of Maryland for 2 years. But in the 1 year that he was here, he kind of exemplified the things that you're speaking of, and put in an astronomical amount of work by himself, as well as the way that he approached all of the other kids, coaches, teachers, and people. I think that he's a guy that used all of the important factors of character and determination. Obviously, at 6'11", that helps. But, he was able to take the next steps and now be on an NBA playoff level team, by doing all of the things while still lacking some skill. And again, he could do that for another 10 years in the NBA as long as things continue to progress. But I think he's been probably the most progressive. And then the second one that I would mention has Euro League ties, was a player named Corey Higgins, that has played for CSKA Moscow and, a couple of the other teams, and, won some championships. But I think that he was a player who also was just here for a short amount of time, but was not a highly regarded, overranked high school player, and just did everything that was asked of him by the coach, and was a sponge from an IQ standpoint, and got looked over kind of by the NBA levels, but proved that he could compete at the highest levels, of the second best league in the world, by using the intangibles, we'll call them, to separate himself when times got tough. But those two, really stick out, from that. But again, they both did have the anthropometrics, or the size and length of a elite athlete. So
Any plans, Dan, of IMG Academies or IMG Academy expanding outside of the US?
I think that the main focus right now will be on digital expansion. I mean, we see a large gap in the resources that are provided to athletes all over the world, when it comes to the auxiliary things. I mean, I believe that basketball is basketball, pretty much wherever you go. I mean, shell drill and dribbling drills and finishing drills. There's no real special sauce with what we're doing from the basketball standpoint. But when you put in a consistent, very specific weightlifting program, you are constantly focused on nutrition and wellness, and then mental toughness and mental strength and psychological development as an athlete. I think that those factors can help move, first of all sports, but I think that they are especially lacking in basketball. And you guys understand it. Let's face the facts. Like, you're watching the Euro soccer and you're watching the Olympics are coming. Basketball is a very unique sport with 5 people on the court. Maybe 8 really contribute, but you need 13 to practice. There's a lot of factors in the sport of basketball that make it more difficult to navigate moving up levels, as you move from 14U to 16U, 16U to 18U. At 18U, your club team starts recruiting outside players. At 20U, it's very, very cutthroat, and there's a lot of agendas. At the men's elite level, or at the pro level of club teams, or even in the NBA, there's wars and political factions in the front offices, and coups of GMs and coaches getting forced out for different reasons. And I don't think that I think the athletes suffer because of that. So I see, the things that we're doing on the front of the auxiliary development being more important than the things that IMG Academy could do by building facilities even all over the world. Because let's face it, even if there's facilities built everywhere, there's still a level of coach education and player education and trust that is more important than any nice gym or any nice weight room that goes on. And again, I think in the NBA, it's almost starting to flip. You see more and more guys coming from international countries, obviously, coming from international countries and playing U.S. college basketball. And then lastly, you're starting to see more players that didn't really have 5-star rankings and elite facilities are starting to carve niches in the NBA. And a lot of the kids and a lot of the players that had access to a lot of nice facilities and a lot of high-end coaching are kind of getting beaten out at the later stages of development by the kids that didn't have things handed to them. I mean, it's just where I see things at right now. But as far as the expansion, yes, I mean our things will be available more and more. But as far as physical locations or franchising or any of that, none of that is in the works right now.
Is there a conscious effort by IMG Academies to recruit international players? For example, extending an invitation to come to IMG. Is there an effort, or um, is it word of mouth uh, that because athletes or kids are coming to IMG?
I mean, I think we always talk about it. There's the players that are looking for more training and higher end training, and then, have the resources to afford to come to IMG. And then there's also the players that, aspire to be like our better players that we are putting into the NBA. So you kind of have the kids that want to train more, and then the kids that want to be around and watch and follow in the footsteps of the higher ranked, future phenom players. From my perspective, we have offices in I believe 8 different countries in the world, and we have the ability to meet with families and explain the situation that we have at IMG Academy. And we have ambassadors, and I believe last year we had, even during the pandemic, I believe we had 54 different countries represented on our campus. At one point, it's been as high as 92 different countries represented on our campus. We've ranged from 45% to as high as 58% international players. So, I mean, I think that we are constantly able to help people get closer to the U.S. college dream, which is the first step to potentially going back. We're also seeing bigger in basketball. We're seeing more kids that only come for high school. They may want to play college in the U.S., but we're seeing more kids that just want to come for 1, 2, maybe 3 years, but they know they're going back home to chase their pro dreams in their country, or they know they're going back home to play college in their country and try to be on the national team. And they just see this 9-month training program and being able to play against, ultra athletic and high end players as a stepping stone to their own personal journey based upon where they're from.
All right, Brian, back to you.
Right, thanks, Vince. Then I just wanted to ask. I'm just curious. Are there any Filipinos on our end who have tried to consult or be associated with IMG?
Not that I am aware of. I do know that, again, a lot of the training aspect and a lot of the things that have done uh, with the national team and with a lot of the pro teams was through Impact Basketball, which I said was Joe Bunasar. When I worked with him, we worked with a lot of the junior teams, and we worked with multiple of the pro teams. I believe it was, man, what was the guy's name? I just remember Big Aussie. Was it Aussie?
Aussie Tolava.
Yeah, yeah. I remember working with all those guys in Los Angeles, and I mean we've had a couple of the college teams that have been to the academy before, but as far as full-time high school players, we have never had a native, or we have never had anybody complete our program, from Philippines.
Okay. Dan, are you familiar with any of the local players we have right now, the budding ones, the young ones?
I am not. I have a little bit of familiarity with some of the guys that had played U.S. college basketball, that had participated on the national team. That were kind of the that would go back and forth between college and their national team stuff. But I personally am not aware of any of the current players that are on the national radar or on the NBA, the potential NBA radar. So
Oh,
I'm willing to learn.
okay. So you haven't heard of this kid named Kai Soto, the seven.
I'm I believe that we played his team when he was at the Skill Factory.
Mm-hmm,
Our postgraduate team played against him. I
mm-hmm,
was not at the game.
mm-hmm.
I am aware at one point that he maybe did try to inquire, or we inquired about his interest in coming to the academy back when he was maybe 15 or 16. Um, along the lines of the same thing, that we have tremendous weight room and ability to develop. And obviously, I'm aware that he played in the G League
Mm-hmm.
Select for a portion of time last year. But I mean, compared to what I know about other college players, I don't know much about his upside, or those things that go into his future development.
He's one of our the I mean I think he's one of the tallest guys right now. We have the locals we have, and he's in the national team, and I believe he's playing for the NBL ever since that. Well, I was just curious because when you said about development, this is one kid who could have used that your the IMG Academy. So I mean 7'3", right, Vince?
Yeah, he's 7'3" and he's still growing.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think, yeah, I mean, I think that obviously here in the US, there's a very interesting time. When I started at IMG Academy, uh, there was two postgraduate programs for fifth year high school players in Florida. This year there was 29. Okay. So that's just fifth year players. You have a 30% of college players are transferring schools and changing schools. You have the G League team that is now actively recruiting and paying high school seniors to skip college. And I'm sure, as you know, now you have the overtime
Overtime
league
league, yeah.
that is starting to pay juniors and seniors 1 and 2 year contracts to move into an NBA path. You have the Australian League, the NBL Superstar, whatever, Future Star program, which is also offering 1 and 2 year contracts to elite American high school players. And I would imagine that the European leagues aren't too far behind. At the same time, which you guys may or may not be familiar with, and I see it as good news, USA Basketball has made a very strong push into certifying coaches, creating curriculum, hosting regional events that have the best players actually competing against each other with no political factions. It's one of those things where if you get invited to USA Basketball, like, you need to be there. Like, it's not something that you miss as a high school player. It's almost a bigger status than being a McDonald's All-American. But we still deal with too many adults, too many family members, too many coaches, too many skill trainers who don't really understand the psychological development of a 14 to 19-year-old young man. And we do not provide enough as a system, not just, I'm not saying IMG Academy or USA Basketball, but we do not provide enough consistency of environment for kids to be able to overcome the adversity that happens as you move into the low levels of pro basketball, whether that be G League, whether that be being a rookie or being a second year player in the NBA. Our system is not preparing players for the adversity that comes with being a young pro, comparatively speaking to the baseball, hockey, or even collegiate to NFL football models. And obviously, our Olympic model for our Olympic sports is very high level when it comes to the psychological development. Whereas basketball is by far the most fragmented, unstable environment that somebody can participate in. So, you know, a lot of times international players get thrown into that craziness, and a lot of times good parents and good coaches just don't know who to listen to, and don't want to slow down to teach the valuable lessons that are needed further into the player's development, say 21, 22, 23 years old. If you want to, again, if you want to look at even Tottenham's situation, Tottenham was tremendous, but we had a very consistent environment here, and this was all that he knew. And then again, Dallas, he got drafted by Dallas. He had two coaches in 2 years. He had a lot of people back in India that wanted him to be part of the startup league that they were having there. He went and tried that out. You know, that didn't work out. They have a very fragmented national system as well that, you know, that he participates in. And, you know, and now he's in a situation that he's still trying to get to that next level of developing. And again, I'm not, you can't stay on IMG's campus for your whole life. I understand that, but that's just an example of, you know, like you once you get out there, you have to, you know, there's a lot of stuff that comes at you fast. So whether it's Kai Soto or the next young player that's developing, you know, the consistency of environment and knowing the right information and teaching the right lessons is what separates the Bruno Fernandos and the John Isaacs. And even if you look at John Morant, who was fantastic, John Morant went to the same high school for 4 years. He went to a mid-major college, played for the same AAU team his whole career. It's, you know, he has the same 3 or 4 people around him all the time. That's why he's killing it at the next level. And other guys have more struggles than that.
Well, anyway, before I turn you back to Vince, you were mentioning overtime earlier. We had one player who was taken there. His name is Francis LeBron Lopez. He's a 6'5" wing. He's part of the team. So there, just wanted to add that.
Okay, well, I mean, me personally, I'm not opposed to the overtime league if players go to it for 2 years. I think 2 years of the same coaches and the same people is actually maybe better than bouncing from your high school team to your trainer to your AAU team to a bunch of showcases. But I also think that it's very important to keep the parents or whoever the close people that are involved in teaching him to be a young man, teaching him the responsibilities of decisions and how you treat people and how you approach things, and, you know, how you apologize when you're wrong and how you show up again after a bad day and how you react and how you handle your social media. There's too many people just letting these kids at this age do whatever they want because they want to capitalize on them. And I'm hoping that Overtime, who is very, very promotional based, really hits a home run with their basketball development because they have that opportunity. They really do.
All right, thank you, Vince.
Is the player's name again?
His name is Francis. Francis LeBron Lopez.
Francis
Okay.
LeBron Lopez.
Okay.
You know, We'll keep an eye on that. All right. Okay, Vince.
Dan, you've dealt with a lot of parents. You've dealt a lot of kids, which means you've dealt with a lot of parents throughout the years. Has the attitude of parents towards kids who are in IMG, who are under you, has it evolved from perhaps being a stage mom or a stage dad, or a bit overreaching to being more calm, more less controlling now, and more trusting of you and the coaches and the trainers over at IMG?
I think it's the same everywhere. Like under 14 and under 16 parents tend to not know much. So they tend to have more unrealistic expectations. They tend to be more demanding. They tend to make all of the decisions for their children. So let's say in an under 14, there's 20 teams. That means there's 20 star players. That means there's 20 backup second leading scorers. Well, when you get to 16U, there's only 10 teams. So now you start combining the MVPs and the second leading scorers. And then when you get to under 17, there's only 7 teams. So the parents have a tough time going from my kid's the best player on the team to my kid is a role player. I don't think that changes in any sport. I think it's all the same. I think it's one of the things that is missing in the education, of the parents is, they don't, when you don't play multiple sports and your kid's the best player on the team, they usually have a tough time adjusting to their role. And their self-esteem is usually based upon their constant performances, and their parents' happiness is then built upon their kids' happiness. So by going away from being multi-sport athletes and by a lot of times having parents coach teams, the deck is stacked against you. The kids at IMG Academy that we have that arrive for 11th grade, 12th grade, or postgraduate are usually much more realistic. And they look at this as a return on investment, not necessarily for scholarship, but for consistency and care. They want consistency of feedback. They want someone to care about their kid, and they want someone to shoot them straight. So again, I can categorize it into those two areas, that when you are in a what we call a pay for play model, or you're paying to participate, and you're moving up those different age groups, the parents are going to be a problem at 13U, 14U, 15U, 16U, because nobody has really educated them on the things that are going to happen next. And you combine best players and somebody's going to lose. And then at the older ages, usually the people that come to us, and usually the people that are seeking more training and more information, have the right expectations. And our burnout rate of our 11th, 12th, and postgrads is very low. Our burnout rate of our younger kids is very high. And a lot of times that is because they have specialized too much, not only on the sport, but too much emotional energy into the sport. So their family revolves around the sport, not just the kid wanting to play all the time, but the family's whole life of traveling every weekend and being at every event and watching every training session and watching every video over and over. You just don't need to be doing that with 13 to 15-year-olds. Their coach can do that with them, but the family should be like going to the amusement park and going to the beach and, going to the movies and just enjoying each other's time. And again, we've just created a culture over these last 15 years as a sports society everywhere with this, crazy obsession with specializing in achieving things that are unachievable.
You've, like I said, you've handled a lot of kids, and you probably have established friendships and relationships with them. And probably, they call you and they text you to ask for advice. what do they usually ask you about? What do you usually advise them on?
Well, we one of the favorite things, and I learned this from Joe Abunassar, and I think that it was one of the most impactful statements. Like, you have to chase when you decide that basketball is what you want to do. You have to plan your day around your training, and you have to be very humble through your failures. But if you plan your day around your training and you learn to live your obsession out that way, and you're humble around your failures, then as basketball starts to, or sports in general, starts to become unachievable or a wall's too big, then you will still love the sport, but you'll just transition where your energy goes. So again, when I look back at IMG Academy and all the kids that I've stayed in contact, which is hundreds, so many of the kids that were coachable and trained hard and followed the instruction, I don't want to say they're all millionaires, but a lot of them went on to start their own businesses and become doctors and become super successful people, and the character traits, that it's there. So when a kid texts me now, you can always hear it like, hey, I coach, I just don't know if this is for me anymore. Okay, cool. Well, what's your next project going to be? What's your next obsession going to be? Do you want to be a coach? Do you want to be a skill trainer? We have tons of kids that were basketball players at IMG that are now strength coaches because they just became obsessed with improving their body and their athleticism. We have tons of, people that had become entrepreneurs and started their own business. Well, that's just like being creative with your moves and being creative with your defense and being creative, like the creativity that it takes to create a business and an idea, that's all transformable. And kids need to hear that on a consistent basis. But as they struggle, whether they're struggling in the NBA or they're struggling, whether they want to quit basketball in 10th grade and go play soccer, it's important to make sure they know that everything they're doing is positive, and it's okay to pivot what you're passionate about. Because if you pivot at the right time, then you'll always love basketball and want to be a fan. If you pivot too late and you try to force the issue, we obviously have other kids that hate the game of basketball. They never picked up a basketball after they left. They don't watch it. They don't want their kids to play it. And again, that's the worst thing that a coach or somebody in my position ever wants to hear, is that somebody isn't a lifelong fan or isn't a lifelong participant. You guys have, your lifelong participation is maybe the best in the world.
Okay, Dan. Anyone from your kids now who the world should watch out for? We should anyone you're training, you're coaching, whether
I
from the
think I
US
think
or
at the I think
outside.
at the yeah, I think at the academy, we just had we have some very high level seniors that are returning. I'll start with last year's group. We had, this year's draft will have Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Jaden Springer from our national championship that we won in 2017 or 2018. They'll both get drafted in the top probably 40 this year. Those two players, will be 10-year NBA players for sure. We have a player from last year that played for a postgraduate team. What the hell is his last name? Brandon Murray. It was our leading scorer on our postgrad team that's going to LSU this upcoming season. We had a player that was in the draft that's returning to Texas Tech named TJ Shannon. We have a player that just absolutely blew up last week at the under-19s playing for Canada named Zachary Eddy, who is playing at Purdue University. And then in our high school program this year, we have Jaden Bradley, Jarris Walker, and Eric Daly Sr., Eric Daly Jr., who are three of the top 25 ranked high school players in the country. who I believe all have NBA starter upside. The other guys I've all mentioned, I believe, are going to be tremendous NBA players. But all three of these seniors we have coming back, our team this year should compete for the national championship again. All three of these players are very position specific. And again, all of our games are streamed on imgacademy.com. So for your fans that want to watch, all our teams' games are streamed for free. So I know the time change is different, but if they want to check these players out throughout the season and see, I have no idea whether they'll take the college path or the G League path or the overtime path. But for our players that are returning to college, we wish them the best of luck and hope that they springboard into the first round next year. That's the goal of how we want to build the rest of the program out.
All right, Brian.
Okay, while you were talking, I was skimming through the players who graduated, and there were a couple of names that were interesting. Ronaldo Bachman.
Yep, Ronaldo was on the first when I first arrived. That was 2003. He was a local kid in Tampa. Very close to the community in this general Tampa Bradenton area. He had a mentor named Chris Ward, who's one of the best trainers and giver back to the games that I've ever been associated with. So he played here for 1 year, and then he went on to do his postgraduate year at Laurinburg. He's come around here and there to train in the summers, and then he was also on the Puerto Rican national team for a little stint. And the Puerto Rican national team actually trained here. So we stay in touch, and I run into him every once in a while, and I followed his career and his craziness that he's gone through with you guys. And he's he's one of our staples on the original team. So
Okay, by saying that, you know what happened here, all right?
I don't remember the exact story, but I remember that it was it was very viral.
Yeah, it was.
And there was a little bit of concern that IMG's name might get thrown in there at some point, but that stuff happens.
Yeah, okay, let's not get into and let's get not into that anymore. I mean, Ronaldo's a good friend also. I've been talking to him. I don't want to get in trouble. Anyway, then here's another name. A former top pick, Michael Beasley. He's been going from one team to another.
Right. Oh yeah, I mean, I could tell Michael Beasley stories all day, but Michael he only went here for like 8th and part of 9th grade. But he actually lived with me in my house.
Oh.
So I got to drive him to school every day and hang out with him and make sure that he was okay. But I still say this. I mean, Michael Beasley was probably probably the most naturally gifted and creative. I mean, in 9th grade, he was putting up 25 and 30-point games against junior colleges, just naturally scoring the ball. I mean, it was his feel and spatial awareness and feel for space and using both hands at even such a young age was amazing. And again, I think he's one of the examples of, if he came up through the system now, he probably would be a lot more successful. Like, basketball was really crazy back then, and he had to bounce around to too many high schools. And then that led to bouncing around to maybe too many NBA teams where he never really got into a rhythm. But one of the kindest, good-hearted, light up the gym people every time I've ever seen him, or even back when he was here, I remember him being in the gym in jeans and flip-flops playing one-on-one for hours on end. But
yeah, well, there's a lot has been said by the critics about him. He's a good scorer. There's no doubt about that. But the other parts of his game, that's what they're trying to hit. I mean, the defense, rebounding things, and everything.
Right. No, and again, the consistency, just the consistency and focus. That's the tough part. But I think I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you're overly familiar with him, but one of our other IMG favorites of all time who actually lives right next door. Like I could literally pick up my computer, walk for 4 minutes, and be at his house. Is Marcus Blakely?
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah,
Oh, he's a favorite here.
yeah. No, that's my man. I mean, he
Plays
trained
well
here ever
here.
since college. He trained here ever since college, and
Mhm.
when he's popping around to the different leagues over there, he always stops through. He owns a house right here. He's friends with everybody on our staff, and he's near and dear to our heart for sure.
Mm. Well, you should have invited him, Vince. Okay. Here is someone who's been making the headlines in the trade rumor mill, Jonathan Isaac. Yeah, Jonathan Isaac.
Right. Uh, Again, the Magic are.
Hmm.
It's hard to be a Heat fan because, again, it's just the whole LeBron thing, and the just. But as you always, you're a Magic fan. I moved here 17 years ago. You have to have a team. Until we had the Tampa Raptors this year, we didn't really have. Orlando's always been it, and they haven't been able to get over the hump. But Jonathan Isaac, the injuries, unfortunately go all the way back to when he was here. He dealt with, ankles and little issues all the time. And I think when you work as hard as he does, that stuff just, catches up. He's got a very unique frame. But I think that, when you look at Orlando's rebuild, I guess we'll call it, they're the GM and the assistant GM, they're Milwaukee guys. I see them wanting to build around length and athleticism and versatility. So I think he fits the mold. Um, but an 84 million dollar contract, with with the way that they may want to do it. I don't know. I mean, again, Mosley, the coach, comes from Dallas. Dallas tended to use their wings as more corner, less ISO, play off of what Luca and Kristaps and everybody was doing. So he doesn't really fit that style of play. And maybe if they're looking to acquire more draft picks, and maybe they're worried about the level of his injuries and his durability. But as far as you want to talk about the same things that we talked about with Bruno Fernando, as far as coming in here at 9 at night and seeing John Isaac, shooting on the shooting machine, or putting a middle schooler through workout drills, or just one of the kindest. When you talk about people that took advantage of the IMG situation, he took advantage of every single second that he was here. And I know he's done the same thing when he went to Florida State, and the same thing when he went to Orlando. But again, you know, sometimes it's time for a change. Sometimes, the way that the business of this works out, sometimes change is good for everybody. So again, it's I always say that about players too. Sometimes it's good to not be where you're from. Sometimes if you're born in New York City, you want to play for the Knicks, but it might be better for your sanity and for your development to play for the Denver Nuggets. And maybe in his case, since he's been in Florida his whole life and went to college in Florida and has tons of family members and tons of influence, maybe it's better for him to be in Utah or Portland. I don't know. That's just, I've seen a lot of times when you're a really nice person, the distractions just grow and the pressure grows. So change of scenery is not bad.
Okay, thanks. Vince, back to you first.
All right. Dan, going back to the documentary, when you were exploring options for Satnam, one of the options you explored with him was going to junior college over there in the US. What do you think would have happened to him had he taken that route?
Um, I think that, at the time, the level of play and the level of what's it called? The level of support that he would have needed would not have been available at a lot of junior colleges. And again, the expectation of, the academic component and being on his own wasn't something that his current support system was necessarily ready to hand off. But again, if he would have went, he was hardworking enough, and I think that he could have maybe benefited from more competition versus a lower level. But the way that we had projected, in a way that a lot of D League teams operate, we thought that it was going to be a safe alternative and that these people were going to be invested in him fully. And again, Dallas was invested in him. He just wanted more before he was ready. I think that if you look at whether it's Satnam Singh or Mo Bamba or Kai Soto or Crispas Porzingis, these guys, they're really going to play their best basketball at 25 to 30 years old. Big players, Clint Capella, like people that are super bigs, they don't really come into their own until they're further down the line. And our original expectation was for Satnam to be in the D League for, 3 or 4 years. And that was something that in his mind just kind of changed. And again, the school aspect of it versus any pro aspect of it, he would have needed substantial support that didn't seem like it was going to be provided to the level that potentially the D League was. We were obviously more than ready for him to not be drafted. So a lot of the expectations at the D League level were just a better support system than a junior college with 2 coaches.
So, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. So Satnam wasn't ready to play in the D League for the next 3 or 4 years. Did he want to play right away?
As far as being able to develop fast enough to be into the NBA. Does that make sense? Like not 3 or 4
Yes,
years to
yes.
actually be able to get on the court for the team that he was playing for, but as far as 3 or 4 years to be able to be NBA ready.
Yes. And over at the academy, do you also, not just for the kids, do you also do coaches training, coach the coaches, train the trainers? Do you have those at IMG?
We allow people to come in and observe. We do not have a current curriculum as far as people coming in and getting certified and going through 1 course or 2 courses. We provide that in soccer. We provide that in tennis. But as far as basketball, we've been fortunate in basketball that we've been a growth sport now for 13 straight years. So our auxiliary businesses and like I said, we actually got out of really focusing on training pros because the rest of our camp and student business and things were growing so fast. As we move into our new facility, we will grow into events and we will grow into hosting live televised college tournaments and things like that. And right, I don't foresee the coaches. It's a saturated market. However, if somebody was in the area and wanted to come and observe for a week and watch our total package of things, we would have that. But we do not have a current digital or in-person coaches certification as of right now.
And then about last year, the WNBA had their bubble over at your campus. How challenging was that to hold a WNBA over during the pandemic over in your campus?
Well, it happened very quickly. And we built a building, a bubble, like a dome, and we put 3 basketball courts down in it. And that's where our kids trained, which was a little restrictive. And we were kind of lucky that COVID had to be restricted anyways, so it worked out. The WNBA teams trained in our 4 courts throughout the day. And then they played their games about 7 miles away at a place called Feld Entertainment. That was a big, gigantic, huge stadium that allowed them to put down the curtain. And the first 2 days were hectic. And then for the next 7 weeks, it was like they were just big campers. And they were just kind of on campus. You pass them, you say hello, you see them. I got to work at, about 15 of the games. So I got to go watch in person. I think that the experience for them and the brand that kind of came out of the wobble was amazing when you see the growth and you just see the level of education of whether it's our coaches or our players about even myself. Like now I probably know 85% of the players and where they went to college and what their background was. 3 years ago, I probably knew 20%. So just based on those statistics, the level of growth is phenomenal. And, the expansion of the franchises is coming. And I think that the amount that it's on TV, is fun. I just, the time of year that their season falls normally versus the time of year that the wobble was, the wobble just fell during the perfect time of year where there wasn't summer league and there wasn't much going on. So they got a ton of eyeballs, and now they're back in competing with the NBA playoffs. So there'll be a little bit of dip. And I hope that, again, you hope that someday that they are paid enough money that they don't have to play in dual leagues, and that they can have a full season that is strictly here in the U.S. And they can continue to help grow the female side of the game at astronomical rates.
Then the looking back at arguably two of the greatest players to play the game, Kobe, Michael, the way they trained, the way they worked in the off season, is that you can't argue with the results, right? But is that something that you would advise your kids to do, to be like Mike, be like Kobe, train like them, work like them? You can't argue with the results. They're both icons, but is that something you would advise kids under you to do?
I mean, I think that one of the intriguing conversations that goes on right now is Kobe and Michael, those examples, they trained at that level when they were 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Now we have players training like that when they are 9, 10, 11, and 12. And from my standpoint, the human body cannot handle that until it's fully developed. So from a physiological standpoint, I would say no. And from a physiological standpoint, I would say kids need to play a lot more when they are younger. And when they then reach college is when they should ramp up the individual pounding and weightlifting that goes on from that standpoint. I mean, we see way, way too many elite players that are overtrained and have a lack of understanding of the game and have a lack of understanding of how to overcome adversity. So when you look at Michael and you look at Kobe, they had a winner's mentality and they knew the game, every aspect of the game. Kobe from his father and high-level high school coaches, and Michael from Dean Smith, and then, from just being a relentless studier of the game. And then they added the intensity of improving their individual game. That's my take. And I don't think kids do that enough. They obviously don't play 5-on-5 enough. They obviously don't focus on being a winner and the best version of yourself enough before they go to do the work. So my advice to the kids would be, play and win as much as you can and learn as much as you can about the games. And then when your body settles into kind of a 80% fully grown state, then ramp up the pounding that you put onto it. Because again, if you even the bubble or not, the injury rates over the next 5 years are going to be astronomic. And just because it's a level of study, I'll throw it out there for the super basketball. The testosterone levels of the current players in the NBA are the lowest that they've been by a large margin, by 250 points, which again, when you talk about guys like Kobe and Michael Jordan that were probably, very high testosterone driven workers. And then you look at the average player now who's on their phone for 6 hours a day and working out for 2 hours a day, your body's going to break down if you overtrain. I mean, I can't emphasize those trends enough. And I can't tell people that they need to train more when they can't even go win a pickup game.
All right, Brian.
Okay, so I'm gonna shift to your other sports because I saw a lot of very familiar names here, Dan. Okay, I'd like to start with baseball. Jose, Jose Ramirez.
Okay.
So
I don't
I,
I don't
I
I don't I don't interact with the baseball players here much.
mhm.
Um, as far as knowing their character or their abilities, I do know that, one of the great things about our baseball program that's a differentiator is obviously we're in Florida, so you can play all year round. We have a staff full of former Major League Baseball players and a staff full of high level former college coaches. So the kids get a huge advantage. But we do also have tremendous strength and conditioning programs that those kids can enter at 16, 17 years old that helps separate them from the other 16 and 17-year-olds because we're able to maintain gains, whereas a lot of the other baseball elite programs have trouble maintaining games because they play so much. So, when you look at all of our elite baseball players, I believe we just had 6 baseball players drafted this week in the major league draft, one as high as the early second round. And, I think that when you look at the growth and the amount of guys we have going to Division I colleges, that number is only going to go up and up and up. The pro guys that come here and train, it's mainly just batting practice and strength and conditioning. It's not like when the NBA players come here and they play pickup and they do 3-on-3 and things like that. We don't have like full level baseball pickup games going on out in the back.
All right. And then I could have noticed one. Well, this I don't know if you can say anything about this from golf. Nelly Corda, who has been
Oh
making
yeah,
headlines. Yeah.
yeah. Nelly, Nelly and her brother. There's 3 of them. There's a brother that plays tennis.
Oh.
Uh, Nelly, and I think the sister's Jessica, maybe.
Mhm.
They're both, but they, again, when you talk about, I can go in to get a drink of water and they're doing box jumps in the weight room and they're bench pressing. And I mean, the amount of, ways that the whole Corda family bases their day around their training and the way that they push each other. And now I believe the younger brother just made it to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. And it's amazing because obviously the father was a high level tennis player himself, Peter Corda, and he's a very supportive, organizing guy. But when you talk about having 3 elite athlete children competing at that level, but even when you walk into the weight room and you see the level of focus on Nellie's face when she's just doing the smallest weight room exercise, it doesn't surprise me that she's reached the highest level. And then on the flip side, when she's just walking by you, you would think you were just passing another college student. Does that, I mean, just the friendliest, nicest person in the world. So, I mean, nothing but future success to her, Jessica and Sevi for sure.
Yeah. Well, in tennis, you have a lot of names here, but I don't know. I don't know if you need to elaborate here. The Williams sisters, maybe Serena and
Uh,
Venus.
they were here a lot as youth players,
Hmm.
and then a lot in their early stages of their career. They are represented by the agency that is connected to the academy, WME. So they've done some promotional things over the years. But I can say that they have been here. I have seen them train, and again, they are out there training and hitting the ball that you don't want to be in front of for sure.
Okay. And one name that for some reason has been popping up on my Facebook the whole day, Maria Sharapova.
Yeah, no, she was one of the she actually, unlike the Williams sisters, Maria actually went to school here for a
Hmm.
large portion before she trained pro. Still has a house here close in Bradenton and stops by. Very, very big ambassador for the program. Comes around during the junior tournaments to have a presence and give back to the academy. So she is kind of a deserving face of coming through every aspect, using this place to all of its advantages, and then obviously capitalizing at the highest level of being a pro.
Okay, back to basketball.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Then I'm gonna have to ask you this. Just recently, the US Team USA lost back-to-back games, and it's quite a big deal for the basketball fans who favored USA. But I'm just wondering, is this because the players from the other countries, like in the case of Nigeria and Australia, have also slowly evolved and caught up?
Well, again, I think that the systems, obviously Australia's developmental system is phenomenal, and their uh, coaching is in preparation is very high level from a standpoint of how they play their lineups and how they create disadvantaged situations. In the terms of Nigeria, again, I think that you're looking at undersized, high ambitious players with a chip on their shoulder. And again, the U.S. team that is currently out there, is not a physical team. They're not built to deal with physicality. And I think that those two matchups and people putting bodies on them all the time, and again, the U.S. kind of living and dying with contested shooting has made it difficult. I mean, they're exhibition games and they're games that the U.S. should win, but at the same time, if maybe it's to create a sense of urgency so they don't get upset at this weird Olympics that's going to go on, then Popovich and these guys, it's hard to question what they're doing until the final result is there. But I do believe the whole continent of Africa, whether it's Nigeria, Angola, Cameroon, I mean, I think those teams are going to be world powers for years to come. And I think that when you look at the growth of the Basketball African League that is coming through the NBA, and you look at where things are shifting, I mean, I think you're going to see the continent of Africa, and I think you're going to see, a lot of the Asian countries, maybe surpass the European powerhouses and the South American powerhouses in the FIBA rankings over the next 3 to 5 years. And
And
and I attribute that to organizational,
mhm.
as well as the players, taking pride in it. I mean, when you watch the Nigerian team, like those players have pride in what they're fighting for. Australia has pride in what they're fighting for. And at a certain point, that will end because they'll be chasing the money. We know that,
Yep.
but while you're building up, it's fun to be a part of, and it's fun to watch. Like, I'm not saying you're never rooting against the US,
Yeah.
but it's when you see their roster, you're like, that's not a very physical roster. And the FIBA game is physical. Let's face it. I mean, it is a physical, very contested, very fairly refed version of basketball compared to the NBA.
Yep. That's true. That's so true. And for my final question for you, Dan, were you
I could do this all day.
were you surprised at the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks being the finalists in this year's NBA Finals?
It goes back to the injuries.
Mhm.
Nobody, Brooklyn Nets spent, half of the world's economy on trying to build their team, and the LA Clippers have, made 7,000 under the table payments to build their roster. And, the injuries that these teams have, you know, allowed for them to not be able to guard these teams. Obviously, the acquisition of Chris Paul was crucial for Phoenix, and the team was just built to compete with overachievers, and that allowed them to be there. With Phoenix, you have to credit the coaching. The guy's been on the hot seat for a year and a half, but when you really watch the adjustments that they make from game to game and the way that they utilize the floor and the way that now their defensive rotations to take away Phoenix's fast breaks on all shots is happening. I don't they don't deserve to be there because of, they didn't necessarily beat the other teams at their best, but the basketball gods always reward those that do the right things. So, I love it. You guys probably love watching it. Adam Silver is probably shriveled up in a little ball on his couch because of the TV ratings. But, I think that it's great for small market teams. And, I think we're leading into maybe the absolute craziest offseason that we ever see. I expect absolute mayhem and craziness of the draft all the way, the free agency, all the way through the draft, all the way through. I think we will see the most demanded trades in the history of the NBA. The most people threatening to sit out, the most people unhappy, people willing to
Buying
walk
out.
away. Yep, buying out, people willing to walk away from contracts, uh, just because because of the current state of what is happening, and the current just again. Look, these franchises are selling, and these new owners are coming in, and a lot of these new owners are crazy. So it's going to be craziness.
Yep. Okay, who do you pick? Who are you gonna pick to be the champion? Bucks or Suns?
I just we have a coach that worked here 3 years ago. He was actually just a assistant coach for the postgraduate team. He left to take a video coordinator volunteer job with the Milwaukee Herd, and now he's actually on the bench for the Milwaukee Bucks during this run. So I have a soft spot in my heart for the Bucks, but the Bucks owner, Mark Lassery, used to actually send his kids here to camp. So there's a couple connections. Thanasis, Giannis's brother, trained here for the draft with me, so I know the brother a little bit. So there's some connections there that. But when you talk about basketball strategy, I think the Suns are tired.
Uh,
I think going back to Phoenix, where they're all those young players are going to have all the distractions of their family, and now the series is tied, and it's just too much. I think the only way that the Suns can win again is if Chris Paul takes 20 or more shots, sinks the defense, keeps the pressure on Milwaukee so that they can get back and set a wall against Giannis. And just let's face it. The referees are going to come into play, whether it's game 5 or game 6. But I think Phoenix is tired, and I don't think that Milwaukee is.
Well, actually, I showed the last in games 3 and 4 when they played. So, how about speaking of Chris Paul? What do you see? What do you think is gonna do after this season?
I mean, I mean, you if you're Phoenix, you just can't do it. You just can't pay him $40 million, uh, and then try to deal with the rest. But I mean, again, I think that it'll be weird. Like I could see him, like ending up in Utah or Miami, somewhere strange. I don't see it being New York. I could see him in Chicago. Like I see him taking like a 3-year deal where he knows he's going to get along with the coach, and he's going to be able to lead a team and almost repeat what they're doing now. Like take a team to the next level. And if it works out, great, but no pressure on him. He can enjoy his family. Everybody will be happy that the franchise won 10 more or 12 more games. But I mean, I don't see him back in Phoenix.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Vince.
Right, Dan. Let me also have my final question. And for that, we go back to baseball. I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on Shohei Otani being a two-way player, and how physically demanding is that? And it will eventually take its toll on his body, both pitching and hitting. From a physical perspective, Dan, what are your thoughts on what he's accomplished so far?
Okay, so a little bit versed here in just this. My wife's actually from Japan, so I have a I think it's obviously a fascinating sports culture. I think it's fascinating culture for their how they, again, just specific to how they raise their children physically, not school or any of that stuff, but the ways that from a very young age they walk to school and they walk different distances, and the amount of calisthenics that are done in school, and the way that they come up through the schooling system in Japan. I do think that a lot of times it's bad because they put so much pressure on themselves because of that culture. But I see him, having the discipline, to do it without injuring himself, for a very long time. I would guess that he has the perfect combination of wingspan, hip to ground ratio, and one of the things that they said about him is that he maybe has both eyes are dominant. He has equal dominant eyes, whereas normal people like me and you have just one dominant eye, and it kind of does stuff. So when you take all of that into account, from his pitching and hitting, he probably has the wherewithal to keep it up longer than people expect. I was just talking to someone yesterday, like I wish there was an app on your phone that gave you a notification every time he was up at bat, so like you could just flip to it and watch his at bats. I know there's something coming, I forget what it's called, buzzer or something, that's going to allow you to do that from an NBA standpoint, as far as your favorite players having a good game and it being able to notify you, and then you can pay like $2 to watch the rest of that game when your favorite player's going off. But as far as Otani, like where he's at, the fact that he doesn't, the team isn't great, could accelerate it. But let's face it, I mean, he's maxed out on the money side of things, no care in the world, doesn't seem to be caught up in too much stuff. He's just, so if he can just keep going out there and doing what he does and avoid the media when he goes home to the best of his ability, I mean, I think he could produce like this for 3 or 4 more years at least, before he probably goes to just a DH role. But I think it will be something that the baseball world has never seen, and it will last longer than the haters, but only because of all of those factors that I mentioned early that are anomalies.
Dan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. And
No problem, Ryan. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And again, if you guys ever want to do it again and talk more basketball development or youth development or
Oh, I would.
things,
Definitely.
please,
Definitely,
you
I
know,
would.
please let me know how to help. I know that I have some unique perspectives and opinions, and these were just some of them. So if you want to go deeper into some topics, let me know. Or if you want me to debate somebody, let me know.
Even controversies.
Huh?
Even
As long,
controversies.
as long as they don't involve IMG Academy directly,
We'll
then
try to bring Ronaldo. We'll try to bring him in as a guest and have you on the program as well.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
no problem. I greatly appreciate it. If there's anything I can do to help you guys or anybody that you're associated with, please let me know.
Will do.
We
Thank
will,
you.
Dan. We will be in touch. Thank you so much
Okay.
again.
Okay.
Stay
Take care.
safe.
Yep.
That ends another episode of Sports for All with Dan Barto, Associate Director of IMG Academy. And for my co host, Brian, the Godfather Yalung, thank you so much for watching. And I don't know if we're going to have an episode tomorrow because I still have no guest, but we'll see. We'll see. You know, the unexpected always happens,
True.
and that it always happens in sports. So, good night, everyone, and so long.
Hi, everybody.